Thank you so much, Khdr Hajoyan, Yezidi community, Vice President of Yezidi National Union. First of all, I want to thank to the Armenian state in the face of Armenian Parliament that recognized the crimes against Yezidi people in 2014 in Sinjar as a genocide. So also I would like to thank to the speakers who are mentioned the genocide of the Yezidis, because you know that now Yezidi people, they don't have their own state, but they need the support from the international community. So I also want to ask you in your works to also represent the Yezidi case, because you know still now the genocide are continuing, because had been created such conditions by which way the Yezidis are the children's still dying, because we have more than 40,000 Yezidis, 400,000 Yezidi refugees in northern Iraq. So also I would like to mention that talks about the facts, the not true facts. For this I want to mention that especially now creating some of films so about Yezidis, about Yezidi genocide, but by this way also some of people or some of politics wants to represent the untrue information about the Yezidi genocide, by this way creating the bad stereotypes against Yezidis. So I want to know your opinion by this way, how we can stop this film, or also the showing these films in the cinemas, if it's possible. Thank you so much.
I just want to tell you that so the Shoah Foundation, when we started our visual history archive, and this was born out of the film Schindler's List, initially the goal was to collect testimonies, 50,000, from survivors and witnesses of the Holocaust. And since 2006, we expanded our collection, and I just want to note for you that we are in the process of collecting Yezidi testimonies. That will be one of our collections. And so look for those, because that testimony, I think, is one of those powerful, and audiovisual testimony in this instance is one of those powerful mediums that you can face deniers, and you can show them this evidence of individuals who witnessed and survived the very genocide that they're seeking to either to deny or obscure or misrepresent. And so I really look forward to sharing those published testimonies with you. We are in the process right now.
There was a call in the morning by the Foreign Affairs Minister of partnerships, and I want to speak about partnerships, because we as institutions, museums, centers of education, we have to partner and we have to tell those stories. For us to do the partnership, we worked with the University of Kurdistan, we brought scholars, we brought an exhibition, there was work, and you can find sponsorship. You need to work on it, but there are organizations that are willing to sponsor these things. So I want to say that where there is a will, there is a way, but we need to do it as institutions. So I think that that is for us, and I'm looking at other institutions, how to do it and how to create those partnerships.
I would also like to respond to your question and simply say that I think you're pointing out something very, very important about genocidal processes, which is the historical marginalization of populations through genocide, such that they end up as refugees, they lose their access to their territory, sometimes for one generation, usually for several. And what springs into effect after a genocide is something that can further marginalize the community that has experienced the genocide and been a target of the genocide. My colleague Irena Massimino and I spent time in northern Iraq right after Nineveh and Sinjar were liberated from ISIS, and we saw that then, and we've been back twice since then. And so I think it's very important what Tali says, which is that institutions and organizations recognize that genocidal patterns extend well beyond the end of a conflict, And if we're not careful, and if we don't put in sensitive mechanisms within international relief, international humanitarian relief, right, within scholarship, within legal approaches to the post-genocide era, we are also responsible for continuing genocidal patterns. Do you know, and a lot of feminist scholars, I just want to mention, have noted that depriving people of their voice is like killing them again. And so if the Yazidi are deprived of their voices after this terrible mass atrocity, we really have failed, not only in providing justice, certainly in preventing, but in ending the genocide and the genocidal processes. So I want to thank you so much for that question. And I hope that out of this global forum will come more nuanced mechanisms to respond to the very, very severe needs of targeted communities afterwards, to have their voice represented and to have some authority and sovereignty over their own story.
Can you hear me? Our institute, which was founded by a Holocaust survivor, and it's located at the University of 20,000 students in northern Arizona. We had 3 speakers who talked about the Yazidi genocide this year alone. Father Patrick Dubois, who talked about his work in Eastern Europe and discovering mass graves by the Nazis of Jews in towns, and who talked about the Yazidi genocide, his work there. Then we had Elisa come and talk about sexual violence with the Yazidi women and young girls. And we had a 3rd person from Germany coming, Mirza, who talked about his efforts to bring some of the enslaved women who ran away or were liberated to Germany and help them set up and give them the support that they need. In my framework here, we're simply talking about knowledge. We're giving knowledge to our university students who are completely ignorant about it. And we're establishing knowledge at the same time about Yazidis in general. We're not talking about reconciliation here. That's a different level of education we need at this point.
Yeah, I can just add okay, is that, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Anyways, I want to agree with everyone, but be a little more pessimistic. You know, I think it's important to recognize, going back to the way that knowledge is produced, that there is a canon of cases that tend to define the field. At one point in time, in 2012, I published an article, Critical Genocide Studies, and I laid out, you know, a possible ideal typical canon of cases at the time, with the Holocaust as the prototype, the triad after that, the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, and the Rwandan genocide, then another rung of cases, and then you move to the more or less, you know, fade away of those cases that are forgotten, or I would add hidden, because I think you can have obscuring of cases, and the Turkish government's efforts are, you know, historically an attempt to obscure the Armenian genocide, but it hasn't worked because of other structures. But the reason I mention that is because basically you're dealing with the situation where the Yezidi case most likely will be continually moving towards the forgotten or hidden side. We do have an interesting thing where the Bangladesh genocide was actually much more towards the forgotten part, and because of our colleague Mofidil's efforts, he's actually himself with his colleagues moved the case much more into awareness. So if you went back to the 2012 canon that I published at the time, that case would have been gone. If you were to do it now, it would actually have moved up. So, but it all depends on actors, funding, structures of knowledge. I think it goes back to how education is produced. If we have education about genocide, are there certain cases that are foregrounded that then inflect everything else? And I would say that's absolutely the case. Anyway, so I agree with everything everybody said, though I think it's, the news for me would not be, despite these efforts, so good. I think it's most likely going to be increasingly forgotten.
I want to add one thing to that, which is that I think we can all agree that it's the responsibility of people who are not victims of genocide currently to reach out to the victims of genocide. It's our responsibility to come to you. It's the responsibility of NGOs. It's the responsibility of international organizations, governments, and academics to come to you. So those in power, have the ability to make sure genocides like the Yazidi genocide are not forgotten. And I think at this global forum, we can commit to making sure that such cases are not forgotten and to reaching out to those who have so little means at that moment to reach out to us.